Well, YouTube, haven't been making videos, but have been spending plenty of money between that guy and this little guy here. Video coming out in that soon. But today I thought I'd do a quick little walk around on this 35G, which I picked up beginning of April this year. Today being day before Halloween, so the 30th of October. But it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of videos on this site, on this machine, other than just guys selling them in auction or something. And where I've got just over 200 hours on it so far. Thought I'd give my somewhat initial thoughts on the thing. I'm finding it's a pretty nice size as far as its actual dimensions. I can get into a lot of tight areas between trees, up against houses, and the like, and be able to get into these tight areas to do jobs. There's definitely plenty of times where I wish it had the muscle of the 60D that I used to run when I worked, not for myself, but for about 80% of the time, this seems to get the job done. Doing stump removals, or isn't like big stumps, I mean little less than 10-inch stumps. I mean, this thing plucks them right out, no problem, but you get into, we'll say, a stump of something like this. Yeah, you're going to be there a while, and good luck if you even can really lift it. Probably about a good 2 foot around the butt right there is where this thing really shows its size, as far as not being able to really get it, and where you'd wish you'd had a bigger machine. That, and also digging through frosty ground. I can't think of the right adjective today. Anywho, frozen ground, digging through that doesn't really do too well. Was on a job this spring, just after I picked up this machine, in fact, where I was working side by side with a guy running a Kubota KX121, which I had previous experience with, not that particular machine, but that model. And he wasn't very experienced with it, and ended up getting it stuck because it was one of those funky times in the spring where part of the ground's thawed and part of it's frozen. And I was digging through the frozen part, and he was over there in the mud pie and sunk right in. And so I jumped into that machine to rescue it, get it out of the mud hole he had put himself into. And it was quite apparent, jumping, immediately from this to that. The difference is the hydraulic speed of this is definitely superior, but the actual hydraulic muscle of that was definitely more. Mind you, this does have a 23.3, I believe, horsepower engine, versus I think that thing, it's got like a 40-something horsepower engine the days before emissions. Which leads me to my next point of why I bought this particular machine. Is A, it's super easy to trailer, and B, it's the biggest Deere machine you can get that is non-DPF equipped. It does have an EGR. That 60D I used to run had an EGR too, so kind of can't really get away from those, I suppose. But as far as DPF is concerned, this is as big as you can go, because it falls underneath that 25 horsepower threshold. Of anything below 25 horse does not need the DPF. I think it's up to 75 horse before you have to have urea injection, which you have to deal with both with that little guy. But yeah, so I was looking at this and the Kubota U35, and ended up going with this just because Deere was willing to talk turkey a little bit better. Prices are really comparable. For those of you wondering, this was roughly, with taxes and insurance, which you had to get in order to get the loan, obviously, because I didn't have the one-time loan payment capital to throw at this thing right out the gate. With taxes and insurance and all that fun stuff, right around 57, I believe, which is essentially on par with what the U35 Kubota was charging out for. The guys I see on this site and many forums, oh yeah, you can go buy one of those Kubotas for 23 grand. Just show me, I'll fly there today. But at any rate, I do like Deere's boom as far as the bushings are concerned. Of these oil-impregnated bushings, they seem to stay tight a lot longer than the Kubota, in addition to the financing. And also, as stupid as it sounds, the button inside the Kubota that you have to hit every time you get in and out in order to run the thumb, no, that was... apart from anything else, that was the biggest deal breaker right there. I cannot stand that after, like I said, running a Kubota KX121 back in the day, and having to deal with that button. Like, no, I'm not actually spending a monthly payment on something where I'm just constantly infuriated, because I do get in and out of the machine quite a bit. being a basically sole proprietor, sole operator, I'm doing the whole show. So it's not like I'm just sitting in there pointing and telling the grunt guy to go shovel this, that, the other. Or certainly bucking up firewood, holding it in the bucket and, getting out and chunking it up, because I got it up in the air at about waist height so your lower back doesn't start screaming after the first hour. Getting in and out doing that, having to hit that button every time, no, totally infuriating. But anywho, back to the walk-around portion. If you look up photos of the 35D, the previous generation of this machine, you'll see that the door looks like it's gargantuan, which is actually a bit deceiving because it's actually this same size opening, just a bigger actual door, but it's just opens up to see the counterweight back here. So inside this little door, pretty easily accessible. You got your fuel filter, oil fill, which takes forever in a day, air filter right here, dipstick right there in yellow, got a little fuel pump right there, fairly easily accessible. Belt tension's kind of a, yeah, it's kind of stuffed up in there, but it can be done. Through this side cover, you've got access to your radiators, keeping them clean, water separator right there, battery right there, got your coolant overflow tank right there, so you can pretty easily jump start things and whatnot in the wintertime should you need to, during the water out of the fuel system. Got your sight glass for hydraulics. Through this door, you have your hydraulic fill. Filter, I believe, is underneath this one. Undo those 4 bolts and it's just a big cartridge thing. Fuel fill and a little clear tube to tell you when you're about to overflow with fuel. Everything's got sort of a safety check so it doesn't blow back on you if you're on an incline or working in the wind trying to fuel things up or check things. Same thing with this rod deal here, which the only detriment to that being every door requires double-handed operation in order to close it. Clearly the downside to not having a DPF is you get the soot streaks like that, which, as you can see on here, I did get the long stick option, which I'm very glad I did, because I don't know if I could really deal with this machine not having that extra bit of reach, and so that's why there's this extra counterweight bolted to the back. Forget how much reach you do gain with it, but I know I sat in a 30G, which is slightly overall smaller, I believe, than this 35, and it had the quote-unquote standard boom, and it looked like I could reach farther with my arm out the front windshield than the boom could. I'm sure it's good for certain applications, but I really wanted the reach with this thing, and I'm not at all regretting I got it. Standard blade, no angle blade. I don't really do enough backfilling of like trenches or something to merit an angle blade, and I'd rather not have the, I don't know, personal opinion, self-perceived weak spot of just that center pivot where all the weight, when you like try to pull a stump or something, all that weight sitting on there. They probably designed it to where it's super rugged. I just look at it as like a weak spot where everything's on that one pivot point if you're sitting right there. Got a 36 inch, I believe, ditching a clean out bucket on this machine right now. Do have the standard digging bucket. Only thing I will say that I don't like about the standard digging bucket is the fact that the teeth are sort of splayed out on the edges. So working right up against the foundation or something, you can't really use the side of the bucket as your guide, so to speak, because you have to factor in the extra couple inches of extra dimension. So you kind of have to stay away. I don't really know why they designed it that way. I'd much rather have the teeth straight in line with the edge of the bucket, and that way you know exactly where your boundaries are. But so well. I will say on this G series, they made the cabs a whole lot better than the D series. This thing, I swear, has more interior room than that 60D. You do get with this G series, you do get this little mid-step thing, which took a little bit of getting used to because I was used to just a flat operator floor. But after a while, you hop right in. Initially, I was sort of stepping with my middle of my foot right in here and almost twisting an ankle, but you end up sort of getting a feel for how to get in and out of the machine and use it to your advantage. One bad part that I did right there, as you can see, I think thing had about 20 hours, and it was one of these sort of vents oriented, let's see if I can rotate, oriented just like that, just slightly open. I got out, hooked it with the back of my heel, popped it right out as I was getting out of the machine, you know, pivoting ball of my foot right there, back of my heel kicked on that, and it's, well, this fin assembly is somewhere in the, the recesses of Never Never Land inside there. We'll see if we can ever extricate that, or if it's just going to live in there for the rest of the time. But while we're right here, behind this keyed door, you have your pattern switch lever to go from, well, I say John Deere cat controls, standard, non-standard, however you really want to put it. Got your washer fluid fill right there, fuse panel behind that little door, cup holder, 12 volt outlet right there. See your pilot control lever right there. Get inside. Right here you get your throttle, lights, washer, high-low speed as far as travel, HVAC controls right there, keyed ignition, horn, the thumb control, and I believe this is for like a joystick digger thing, this button on the back side of this joystick. This one on this side has no buttons, although it does have a place for adding things, I believe, maybe if you have like an articulating ditching bucket or something like that. Got your wiper assembly on the left. Dual handles, does not have the piston operated deal like Kubota has for opening the front door, which I find to be a lot nicer than this, but you basically just have to watch what you're doing and not drop the window, and definitely have to make sure it's seated in the up position when you get it up there. Got your kill switch for the backup beeper, which might be unplugged. Something about it getting really annoying. Pull up that so we can start thing. Yep, we've got 219.1 hours, all worn out, ready for a trade-in. You got your fuel gauge, temperature gauge. This is for the low power and high power. I won't really rev it up right now because it's kind of cold still. Auto idle on and off. Got your menu here. You can do auto shutdown, so if you left it sitting for like 10 minutes running, it'll automatically shut itself off to save fuel. Clock setup, trip meter, so when you're on job you can, you know, do dual trips. Just the brightness of the screen, and that's all she wrote. I will say that Kubota seems to be a lot more intuitive as far as the menu is concerned. This is pretty rudimentary, if I'm honest. You can hold the menu button, and then let's see if I can do this with one hand. And then you can sort of cycle through like your trip meters, and then back to the regular hour meter that way, so you don't have to go into that menu and bypass or go through all that rigmarole in order to get to the trip meter if you're just wanting to switch screens. Otherwise, standard fare. You got your boom back and forth right there with that little deal for a lockout, so that way you can just use it as a footrest. Traction control levers, and view out the window. I do have a suspension seat cloth, not too bad as far as comfort. Like I said, this machine's a whole lot more roomier feeling than this D series. And I will say that this, they had a 50G with the extended boom option sitting on the lot as well. And this, even with the extended boom, felt way more balanced. That was another thing I really liked about it. Versus the D, or the 50 rather, that had the long boom option. I imagine the standard boom on the 50G feels really balanced, but something about that long boom, I went and sort of, you know, dropped the boom a little bit, sort of shock load the thing to see how much it tilted. And yeah, that 50 was all over the place, it felt like, to me. I don't know, but personal opinion, but that's how I was feeling about it. So yeah, that's the my quickie thoughts on the John Deere 35G. So far, a good machine, I think. Definitely not for huge jobs, but for smaller projects, or I've done a couple bigger jobs with it too, and it was able to handle it. It's really seems to be a pretty good all-around machine. Pretty impressive for what they can do with just 23 horsepower. I don't know what kind of hydraulic trickery they've done under the hood, so to speak, of this thing, but it seems to have a fair amount of oomph. Obviously not as much as a 40 horsepower machine, but that's kind of self-explanatory as to why that would be. I'm liking it, and hopefully it lasts for quite a number of years, or at least for another 4 years until if I go with the regular payment plan and get this thing paid off for. And then I'll have just a couple more years after that for that thing. Ain't life grand. Anyway, John Deere 35G. Thanks for watching.